My parents sided with my brother and abused me when I was a teenager. Now they are asking me to save my dying father by donating a part of my body. I experienced something genuinely terrifying at the hands of my own brother during those early years, when I should have been finding my identity and relishing the ungainly road to adulthood. I was 2 years older than him, but that made absolutely no difference because he was physically stronger than me. He was stronger and bigger than me, and he took advantage of that to hurt me. Scars weren't limited to the physical suffering. It was the mental anguish that ensued. Knowing how much influence he had, my brother would frequently threaten me, telling me that if I ever dared to speak out about what he was doing, no one would believe me. This menace made me feel alone and completely helpless, hanging over me like a heavy cloud. Nevertheless, in spite of the anxiety and the possible outcomes, I eventually hit a wall where I was unable to carry the weight by myself. I then decided to inform my parents after gathering all of my bravery, naively expecting justice to be served, or, in any case, safeguarding. I was dealt a devastating blow by my parents' response, even more agonizing than any physical harm my brother might cause. They didn't accept my story, not even for one instant. Anger swiftly replaced their first amazement in their eyes, not in his direction, but in mine. They were enraged and felt that I should be punished for criticizing my brother. He was the ideal child, capable of such abhorrent deeds. I recall being so frantic to prove the truth to them that I showed them the tangible proof, the bruises that covered my legs and the teeth marks that served as a sobering reminder of his brutality. Nevertheless, my mother did not want to trust me, even in the face of overwhelming proof. It seemed as though she had opted for blindness rather than confronting a painful truth. My family's treachery left me with a deep-seated animosity that over time turned into hatred. I detested my brother because of the trauma and torture he inflicted upon me. More than everything, though, I detested my parents for not doing more to keep me safe. I decided to leave home the day I turned 18 in order to get away from a toxic environment that could only bring me misery. I allowed this hatred to distort my perspective of the world for years as I carried it about with me. Paradoxically, it was only due of my brother's own mistakes that my parents were ever made aware of the reality. He confessed to my dad one night when he was intoxicated and boasted about his antics as like they were some kind of sinister accomplishment. He acknowledged that he had injured me, and he was sickly amused by the whole thing, viewing it as a game. My parents could no longer maintain their denial once they were confronted with the unquestionable truth directly from the offender. But the harm was already done. A mere admission of the reality could not reverse the years of denial and disregard. We couldn't just patch up the divide between us with regrets or apologies because it was too big and the wounds too deep. My adolescent years, a period that ought to have been full of learning and development, was tainted by hurt and betrayal, which helped to mold me into the person I am today. Forever altered by my family's deeds that day when they reached out. A part of me secretly wished for an apology or some sort of recognition for the suffering I had gone through. I reasoned that perhaps, just perhaps, they wanted to hold my brother accountable for his acts, assist heal the wounds, or both. But my expectations were not at all met by the reality. Taking the stance that everyone makes errors, my mother chose to ignore everything. She recommended that we should simply forget about what happened, act like nothing happened, and carry on as a single, happy family. It seemed as though the years of anguish and agony I endured were but insignificant blips that could be readily forgotten. For me, that was the last straw. That's when I knew it was pointless to try to get understanding or validation from them. They were not what I needed or wanted in a family. I therefore had to make the difficult decision to part ways with them and stop talking to them. That choice signaled the start of a new chapter in my life, one in which the abuse and neglect I had endured at their hands would no longer define who I was. After several years, I began to restore myself via intense work and counseling. I created a happy, loving, and peaceful existence for myself. I was happy in a marriage to a lovely man who taught me what it was to be loved and cared for. We started fantasizing about creating our own family, one built on love and trust, right when I felt I was free of the past. My mother was the one to knock on it. They were in a grave situation, and my father's health was rapidly declining due to liver failure. My mother contacted me after learning that we had the same blood type and urged me to think about giving some of my liver to help save him. Her request carried with it the suggestion that, given everything, I owed them a favor and should intervene. The same arrogance and entitlement that turned me off all those years ago pierced her words. It was as though the years of mistreatment, the denial, and the lack of encouragement had no significance, as if they needed me today, and I should just forget about the past. However, I was unable to. It was unfathomable to even consider carrying it out and endangering my safety for people who had repeatedly demonstrated their indifference to my welfare. No, I replied. Not only was it a definite no to the donation proposal, but it was also a firm no to letting them back into my life and resurrecting past wounds that had taken so long to heal. The implication in my mother's statements that I owed them this new lease on life further strengthened my determination. It served as a sobering reminder of the emotional divide that existed between us and that manipulation or guilt could not heal. It was not an easy decision to choose my well-being and myself, but it was the right one. It was a proclamation that the past and their expectations of me were history. My priorities have always been and always will be my life, my happiness, and the future of my family. Here's the situation then. My father is really ill. Since our blood types are similar, my mother believes that since I have his liver, I should be the superhero who comes to the rescue when it's in serious trouble. The really bad news is this. Things involving my family and me. They are not the least bit rocky. Yes, we had a brief disagreement. A little rocky, actually. More like the gap the size of a large, deep canyon. A little rocky, actually. Now, when my brother chose to portray the antagonist in the narrative, things became much more difficult. He told my spouse a number of false and hurtful things about me behind my back. He accused me of being a liar, indolent, and even made up outrageous things about me. They might be from a subpar film. He attempted to paint myself as the world's worst person, my partner. Before my brother began to fabricate these stories, he was my rock during the entire ordeal. I hadn't told him all about my past and the turmoil in my family. Who wants to go through all of that again, really? However, my spouse didn't take my brother's wild tales at face value when they were revealed. He approached me in search of the truth. And allow me to describe the exchange to you. It was the hardest thing I've ever experienced. I ended up telling him everything and cried a lot, everything that took place in its entirety, and he just hugged me through it all, making me feel cherished and safe. It was difficult, but there were also moments when you could see the bright side and were glad to have someone by your side who was so encouraging. This is when it gets very intense, though. My brother and mother, they persisted without stopping. They persisted in their pushing, attempting to use guilt trips to get me to comply with their demands, which included testing to determine whether I could donate my dad's organs. They even had the audacity to demand an apology from me, acting as though it was my fault. Fortunately, my hubby has been wonderful. He has protected me from their attempts to drag me back into the turmoil, acting as if he were my own personal superhero. But here's where the true twist lies. I feel like I've been thrown back in time by all this drama. I feel like I'm a teenager again when it comes to my emotional weaknesses and concerns. Having to deal with all of this for the first time has opened your eyes to the fact that some of the battles you thought you won in the past aren't as won. However, having a supporter like my spouse alters the dynamics of the situation. While it doesn't solve the issue, it does give you a little more bravery when facing it. The last comment before the update is this one. I sincerely apologize for learning about the suffering and anguish you have endured in your lifetime because of your brother's maltreatment and your parents' lack of encouragement. It is obvious that you have gone through a lot of pain. Therefore, it makes perfect sense that you would feel this way. It's crucial to put your own well-being and mental health first. Your decision to cut ties with your family was one of self-defense. It's clear that what they did has hurt you a great deal, and that their latest attempts to make you feel guilty into lending a hand are making you feel even worse. You should put your well-being, mental health, and safety first and foremost. It's critical to keep in mind that you are not accountable for the decisions your family members have made, nor do their deeds represent your value. Regarding your spouse, it's fantastic that he has shown you support and understanding at this trying time. Being supported by someone might have a big positive effect on your healing process. In light of your family's recent communication, you may want to think about getting professional advice from a therapist or counselor. They can provide you the instruments and coping mechanisms you need to handle these challenging relationships and feelings. You might also choose to look into your legal options for restraining orders or other protective measures if the harassment from your family members persists and gets worse. The choice to stay in touch with your family in any way should ultimately come down to what you think is best for your own recovery and well-being. You are entitled to make decisions that put your well-being and security first. It's critical to surround yourself with individuals who respect your limits and are there for you. Recall that getting help when required is normal, and that the healing process is a journey. It's admirable how strong you were to share your experience and ask for help, and I hope that as you go forward, you keep getting the help you need. Let's get started with the update. Okay, so let me tell you what has been going on in my life recently, and it's been one crazy ride, I tell you. The last few days, completely insane. A great deal has happened, and to be really honest, it's been quite difficult to even decide where to begin recounting the narrative. There were times when I felt incredibly helpless, as if I couldn't defend myself and nearly caved in to the chaos. The really bad news is this. With all of your comments and encouragement, you guys have truly saved my life. Sincerely, you've made it clear to me that I'm not the villain in this situation and that the other people have no right to hold me responsible. People keep telling me that I'm not at fault in this situation every day, and having my spouse by my side has been like having my own personal superhero. He has supported me unconditionally, and I just want to say how much I appreciate all of you. For me, reading through all of your suggestions and remarks has changed everything. I even went so far as to ask to speak with my family in an attempt to obtain additional information and possibly even video proof of their behavior. My hubby, though, has been a rock through it all. He's been by my side the entire time, which really irritated my mother. She insisted that he have no part in this, attempting to portray this entire situation as a family matter. Furthermore, pretending that my spouse and I didn't marry the way they believed we ought to doesn't matter. However, I didn't back down. He's with me, and that's non-negotiable, so whether they like it or not, he's part of this, I informed him. Amid the midst of this mayhem, it has been invaluable to have folks support me and tell me that I'm making the correct decisions. I feel more powerful now that I have a large group of people rooting for me. In addition, my hubby is standing next to me. Thus, I would want to express my sincere gratitude to everyone who has been thinking about me. It significantly changed the situation. My folks did not lie. It's even worse than I had imagined that my dad was dying. I have to give my liver to him ASAP. Apparently, I was their last choice as well. They thought that, like I did as a youngster, I would immediately submit to their orders and do anything they asked of me. However, it is no longer the case. I started recording every phone conversation, as others had advised. As some had advised me to, I made an effort to get them to acknowledge the abuse and their part in it. My brother's actions were not recommended, but they were also pointless, based on my investigation. Mom simply won't stop saying that didn't happen. That is never true, that I'm crazy, and that the family was my main target. I even promised my father that if they helped me testify or sign a paper detailing what my brother had done to me, I would take the test. But once more, it was pointless. Mom always insists that I was lying and that it never happened. And your father, saying comments like, "How dare I try to extort them with something like that?" He acted as though I had insulted him. Then I ought to feel embarrassed by what I did to them, bending down in front of them to ask for their pardon and sacrificing anything I had in order to preserve his life. They still think I'm the troublesome kid they always said I was, that they still have power over me, and that I owe them something despite everything that has transpired, including that particular circumstance. That was it for me. I informed them that I wouldn't do it, that they are not entitled to ask me any questions, that they are unimportant to me. My parents, because they let my brother mistreat me. I left them, but not before we got to the car with my husband. After we left, my mother yelled at me for slaying my own father. She even cited the Bible to support her claim that I ought to obey my parents. It appears, though, that I wanted to add one more sin to my list. The harassment has been worse since then. I receive calls on a daily basis, many horrible texts accusing me of murder and selfishness. I made every effort to appear and stay powerful. However, I've been crying in the shower every day. It hurts, even now. We attempted to obtain a restriction order, but since they don't think I'm in immediate danger, the process will be absurdly delayed. In addition, December is a day when not much gets done. However, my mother's call 2 days ago was the tipping point for me. I attempt to have anything that would aid me in case she says something or acknowledges what my brother did, so I answer all the calls and record them. However, this time she intentionally wounded me. She was always capable of hurting me. Which keys are pressed? She told me many terrible stories, similar to how they informed everyone in their neighborhood that I fled and turned into a prostitute due to my addiction. that I was an embarrassment for slaying my father by lying and turning my back on the family. That shall burn in hell. She informed me that I was broke in March, and that my lack of purity would prevent me from ever truly being loved. That man, that's what she called my husband, would take advantage of me, grow bored, and abandon me like the piece of trash I am, and that every man would follow suit. She worked on it for half an hour. I initially attempted to respond, make her say something, make her do something wrong, but eventually it became too much. I broke because I was at my breaking point. My spouse discovered me lying on the ground. I was inconsolable, trembling. I made an effort to be brave, confront them, and perhaps find some justice for what he had done. But I reached my breaking point. I am not that powerful. I sobbed, and he gave me a hug. I pleaded with him not to go, to love me, to remove me from that place. I had no interest in learning anything about them. He held me while I sobbed and helped me go to sleep. I woke up in bed, and I'm not sure how he did it. It was 4 a.m. Upon awakening, he was still up, tending to me. I informed him that I was at my limit. I'm powerless to resist this, the exchange, attempting to get my brother to pay. I just wanted to get away because I was done. He assured me that as long as I was secure and content, he would do everything I asked. He approached me yesterday and questioned my sincerity when I mentioned making an escape. Yes, I replied to him, all I wanted to do was leave. I should turn off my phone and stop worrying about this. I therefore couldn't wait for our excursion. We spend Christmas and New Year's Eve with his family each year. His family is amazing, and those days are super fun. Well, he said that we could have a little vacations before our vacations. He explained that after a little research, he booked us a vacation to Las Vegas and Disney. He got everything ready, only needed to confirm. So he was asking me. I really wanted to get out. I was outraged. I freaking love Disney and always wanted to travel to Disneyland. I wanted to say yes, but how are we going to pay it? Although we have some savings and are not impoverished, what he was offering me seemed incredibly pricey. In order to contextualize you, in addition to our own savings, my spouse has been saving for a full gaming set because he enjoys playing video games. He told me he needed to do something after seeing me and how I was, even though he intended to buy it for his birthday. He therefore made the decision to spend that money. One of the most exquisite things he has done for me is this. I sobbed and gave him a hug. We are now traveling to the USA. I know this isn't the answer, and when I get back, these creatures won't be gone, but I'm leaving them behind with this. To be surrounded by people that love and care about me, to have fun, and to be at peace. That's a win in my book. I told the hospital that I don't want to get the transplant now, under any circumstances, and that I'm feeling forced to get one. There's nothing I'm providing him. I text my mother one last time, telling her to stop bothering me and never try to talk to me again. After that, I'll go to the police and try my hardest to get my brother arrested. None of them should ever be a part of my life again. I've blocked my mother's phone as well as any other unknown number they may have been using, and I'm returning to no communication. It's going to be difficult, drawn out, and painful, but I have my husband's and all of you lovely Reddit users' support once more. Many thanks and good holidays to all. Second tale. Am I the bad person for staying on the land my parents gave me to allow my sister, her husband, and their child to move in with my golden child? So out of the 4 of us kids, my 34-year-old big sister was the first to become a mother. She has a 5-year-old daughter. She gets everything she wants, I can assure you of that. She is constantly spoiled rotten by my sister. Every time my sister requests for anything similar, even our grandparents, uncles, and aunts have to make exceptions. Our sister wanted someone to watch her daughter while she went out with her friends for a weekend, so our parents postponed their planned special vacation for their anniversary. Let's now discuss a very difficult period. I experienced the tragic death of my lover, who was very important to me, and the loss of my work at the same time. I eventually moved back to my childhood home since things were so difficult. My parents used to rent out this country property that they owned, but it had been neglected for a while and was beginning to fall apart. They said I could remain there for however long I needed to without having to pay anything. They handled it pretty well. I spent a great deal of time, energy, and money renovating the space. As I was completing all of this, it began to look pretty good. I have a new pal. She has a little daughter and is from Ukraine. I encouraged them to stay with me for a while until they could get back on their feet because they've been going through a difficult time. Having the companionship was also pleasant. Though she hasn't made up her mind yet, my new friend from Ukraine is incredibly appreciative of my offer to stay with me. She wants to try making it on her own. She might move in, and my folks were happy for it, until some fresh drama struck. The former employer of my sister's husband was involved in some dubious business dealings, breaking the law in order to increase profits. The law eventually caught up with them. The CEO left the country and closed the business. To cut a long story short, my sister's family unexpectedly had to return to our hometown and quickly moved in with my parents after a number of other events. Then this notion occurred to my family. They intended the house I fixed up to be inherited by my sister and her family, and me to move back in with my parents. They stated it would be great for my niece to grow up in such a lovely spot, near to nature, and that the house was too huge for only me. I couldn't understand this. With 2 extra bedrooms, my parents' home is spacious enough for everyone. Each of my sister's spouse and their child might have a separate room. I didn't really have a room of my own when I was 5. Furthermore, my sister's husband is still very wealthy from his previous work, and they recently purchased a fancy car. They had no trouble affording a house of their own. When I discussed my friend Olhar and her daughter and all the hard work I had put into the property, it was kind of dismissed by my family. My parents became very upset when I told them that I wanted to support my friend Olhar and her daughter. They were astounded that I was considering aiding someone else above my niece and my own sister. They attempted to give the impression that my sister was experiencing the same difficulties as Olhar. At last, my parents established the law, stating that since you are residing on our land, you must abide by it. They assured me the house was mine to call home for until long I needed it, and I reminded them of that. However, the topic of conversation shifted, as though we were discussing commercial matters rather than personal matters. They did not go so far as to throw me out, but they and other family members texted and called me every day. They were attempting to instill guilt in me by implying that I was being self-centered by refusing to allow my sister, who was purportedly going through a lot, to move into the better house with her daughter. The only people in the family who understand my perspective are my brothers, but because they're merely college students, no one really pays attention to what they have to say. I feel as though I'm in a strange parallel universe where nobody can understand anything I say or experience. I'm now questioning if I'm being unreasonable in this situation.